Good morning, everyone. This is for grade 5s and 6s, both of you. You should watch the entire video, both of you, both groups, because there's lots of relevant information in here. This will probably be shorter than some of my other videos because if you're certain things, you can just watch yesterday's video to figure them out. I don't need to repeat them today, okay? So there's two main ideas in this. The first one is what to do when you have multiple different things. And the second is making sure you do everything in lowest terms. So I'm going to talk about lowest terms first. Do you remember lowest terms? Okay. So for example, let's say you get a fraction that's 4/8. That is not your answer. Your answer is 1/2. Remember, you divide this by 4 and then you do the same thing on the bottom. 4 divided by 4 is 1, 8 divided by 4 is 2. Or let's say you get something like 7/21. Divided by 7, divided by 7, and you get 1/3. Or it doesn't have to end up being a 1 over something. Maybe you've got, let's say you've got 9 and you've got 24. Now, 9 doesn't go into 24, but 3 goes into both of these numbers. So divide by 3, that gives you a 3 there. 24 divided by 3 is 8, and that's your number. This is what it means by lowest terms. We did this when we were doing fraction work. If you can't remember how to do lowest terms, at the very least get the proper other fraction in there because it will be worth half points, but try and do the lowest terms. Okay, so let's talk about this. So let's say we're going to toss a coin and roll a dice. We're going to do both of those things. So we know for a coin, I can get a heads or I can get a tails. And we know for a dice, I can get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. So those are my options. So for my coin, I could get a head. And then I could get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Those are all possibilities when I roll my dice. See that? Then when I toss my coin, I could get a tails. That's another possibility. And I roll my dice, I still get the possibilities of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there you go. That's what this is supposed to look like. For the coin, I have to make sure that I have the heads and the tails both written down because I have the possibility of the heads and I have a possibility of the tails. For the dice, I have to make sure I do all of the numbers twice. I have to do all of the numbers once for heads and I have to do all of the numbers once for tails. You see that? Okay. And then what's my outcome? My outcome is heads 1, heads 2, heads 3, heads and 4, heads and 5, and heads and 6. See that? I've got a heads and I've got a 6. I've got a heads and a 5. Or I have heads and 1, tails and 1, tails and 2, tails and 3, tails and 4, tails and 5, or tails and 6. So that means how many outcomes? Well, that's pretty easy to see. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got 12 outcomes. And for those of you who are wondering about the math, it's actually really simple because look at this. There's 2 for coins and there's 6 for dice. 2 times 6 equals 12 outcomes. See how that works? So I've drawn you the picture. This isn't really a picture, but I've done this diagram here to show you how you get 12 outcomes. But you can also just do the dice, which is really, really cool. Some other questions you could get asked about this is how many outcomes have tails? So how many outcomes have tails? Well, 6/12 of your outcome have 12 tails. And remember what I said about simplest form? That means 1/2. That should be your answer. Not 6/12, but 1/2 because you divide this by 6 and you divide this by 6. Or how about how many of your outcomes have the number 2? Well, in this case, we have 2/12. There's one with a 2 and there's another one with a 2. So 2/12. If you didn't follow me on the tails, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tails. That's why this number is a 6 here. Okay. And again, this has to be in simplest form. So it's 1/6. In this case, we divide by 2, divide by 2. Remember, always do the same on the top as on the bottom. And we can keep going with this over and over and over again. All sorts of different questions related to this. How many outcomes have 6s? Also 2/12 or 1/6. How many outcomes have a 4 and an heads? Well, that's only 1/12. because heads and 4, this is the only possibility for heads and 4. There's no others. There's none of the other heads have 4. Oh, sorry, I did the 5. Heads and 4, there it is. Heads and 4. But this is a heads and 5, so that one doesn't count. That's a heads and 6, it doesn't count. None of these ones at the bottom are heads, they don't count, right? Okay, so this is really important that you pay attention to this kind of stuff, all right? And then you might even get a question, how many outcomes have a tail and, okay, how many outcomes have odd numbers, for example? Well, now, if you have a question that has how many outcomes have odd numbers, we don't care about whether it's a heads or tail because it's not asking for it, right? It's just asking for odd. So these are all odd numbers right here, which means we have 6/12, which means we have a half. Half of our outcomes have odd numbers. Or they could ask us how many of our numbers are heads and even. Heads and even. So first of all, we already know we don't want to talk about tails at all because tails are not heads, right? And then where are my even numbers? There's a head and even, there's a head and even, there's a head and even. So we've got 3 12s that are heads and even numbers, which actually works out to 1/4. So pay very close attention to what the question is asking you. All right, now if I go down to this next one right here, we're asking the gender of the children that people could have, okay? So this is really simple because they either could have a boy or they could have a girl. That's their only options, right? So their first child, they could have a boy or they could have a girl, right? That's simple. Now the second child doesn't depend on the first child. Now it's a second child, so they could have a boy or a girl the second time too. But I have to write that 2 times because if they had a boy the first time, they could have a boy or a girl the second time. If they had a girl the first time, they could have a boy or a girl the second time. Now the third child, again, could be a boy or a girl. But now I have to write it 4 times because the third child doesn't depend on the second child or the first child. It's just its own thing. So I have to keep going, okay? So now we can actually trace a path. So for example, if we trace this path right here, we've got the outcome boy, boy, boy. But if we trace this path, we have the outcome boy, boy, girl. Then we've got boy, girl, boy, or boy, girl, girl. See that? Okay. Then we go to the next one. That's the last one right here. Then we go this one. You see how you have to take one from every column. We have to take one from here, one from here, and one from here. So this one we've got girl, boy, boy. Then we've got girl, boy, girl. That's this path right there. Then we've got girl, girl, boy. That's this path right here. And then we've got girl, 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 which is the last path. See that? Okay. So now, how many possible outcomes do we have? Well, we can count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 outcomes. Okay. So now we could ask, and by the way, if you're following the math on this also does the times thing. So there's 2 possible outcomes here, there's 2 possible outcomes here, and there's 2. The reason it's 2 is because you just got these 2, okay? So 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. So you don't have to make this diagram to figure out your outcomes, but the outcomes certainly help you figure it out, okay? So now we can ask some question. What's the possibility of getting only girls? Well, the possibility of getting only girls is 1 in 8. There's 8 options, but there's only one option that's only girls, okay? The possibility of getting only boys is also the same. 1/8. And by the way, this was my family before Nigel and Katrina came along. We was 3 girls. My dad had 3 girls in a row. My older sister, then me, then my younger sister. So there's a 1 in 8 chance that we would have a family like that. Okay? Now, what is the possibility of having 2 girls? Well, this gets a little more complicated now. Because if we look through, there's 2 girls right here. There's 2 girls right here. Doesn't matter what order, because I didn't say what's the possibility of having 2 girls before you have a boy. I just said what's the possibility of having 2 girls, period. So we look through every place where there's 2 girl options. So the 2 girl options is 3/8. And if you're curious, two boys have the same options. I'm just going to change color here. There's two boys, there's two boys, and there's two boys. Okay, that's also 3/8. See that? All right, and you can see that the only ones that are left are the girl, girl, and the boy, boy, as ones we haven't talked about for that one. Okay, now, what if I wanted to know the possibility of having a boy first and then two girls? One boy first, because I want the oldest boy to be a child to be a boy, and then two girls. Okay, now there's only one option. See that? Yes, there's only one boy here. That's true, but he's not first, is he? Okay, so this one doesn't count because he's not first. So then we have a 1/8 chance again. If, on the other hand, I just want to know about the possibility of having one boy, it doesn't matter when the boy is born. I just have to have one boy. Well, then my options are here. There's one boy, there's one boy, and there's one boy. So my possibility of that is 3/8, a little bit under half. Okay? So that's how you do this. Make sure when you write these out, your first choice, I didn't know I could change color. Your first choice is there, boy, boy. Sorry, boy, girl. Then your second choice is here, but you have to write it twice because you have to write it once for the boy and then once for the girl. Then your third choice is here, but you have to write it 4 times because you have to write it once for this one, once for this one, once for this one, and once for this one. Okay, let me just look at your work very quickly with you, and then we'll move on. All right, so here, this is just very simply what I did already. You've got 2 choices. You've got white bread and brown bread. So you have to write your bread choices here, and then you have to write your filling choices here. And these are your fillings. Turkey breast, corned beef. Turkey breast is TB, corned beef is CB, and egg salad is EG. Okay? And then you have to write your choices here. And just like the ones I was showing you, you have to write all of it. So you have to write white and brown. You've got to write all 3 choices once, then you got to write all 3 choices here, and then you write what your combination is. So this is white and turkey breast. The next one should be white and corned beef, etc. And then the probabilities, I'm going to leave that with you. Now this one here, they require you to do more of the work. So they've already done puppet for you, yay, and they've already done yo-yo for you, yay, but they haven't done top and they haven't done sorry. You got to make sure that for the first spin, you talk about all 4. You have to talk about puppet, you have to talk about yo-yo, you have to talk about sorry, and you have to talk about top. And then for the second spin, you got to talk about all 4 every single time. You see how it's 4? So the next one, you also have to talk about all 4. And the next one after that, you have to talk about all 4. Okay. Grade 6s, this is actually pretty simple. It tells you how many balls there are in the box. Oh, I just figured out how to do that. That's cool. Okay, I can make this thinner. And then it shows you all of these. Now, they don't tell you how much purple is, but they tell you it's the rest. So that means when you add up red, yellow, green, and purple, it has to equal 24. So how many purple are there then? What number would go for purple if 8 plus 4 plus 9 plus something, we don't know what, equals 24. This one right here, you just have to count fish. For the very last one here, once you've done everything else, don't do this first, do this last. Draw yourself 2 more fish, make them 8s, and then do the math again. Okay? This coin toss outcome is exactly like what I did with the boys and girls. It's just instead of boys and girls, you have heads and tails. That's it. Okay? And how many possible outcomes are? You got to figure that out. All of these questions. Okay? And then the last one, you're doing a prediction, so you have to think about what the fractions are. Okay? So if you're predicting something, you've got, let's say you have a possibility of 1 in 6, but you want to get to 80. How much will be on top? Most likely. Okay, it's 1 in 8. You have a chance in 1 in 8. Okay, if you have a 1 in 8 chance of getting something, then if you do 80 tosses, what number is going to go up here? Well, this is times 10, so this should be times 10. So you'll probably get 10 of that thing. if you're trying to do it 80 times. Okay? All right, that's the end of that. I hope you guys have a good day with this, and make sure that you get this work done. It is due tomorrow. Some of you don't seem to understand that you're supposed to do this work right away and then hand it in the next day, so this is just a reminder, it's due tomorrow. Both of you are doing day 88.